EU leaders try to agree on a common corporate tax regime to plug loopholes for big multinational companies like Google, Apple and Amazon. Samsung Electronics makes record profits boosted by an upswing in its chips division and strong mobile phone sales. Hello and a very warm welcome. This is World Business Report. I'm Sally Bundock. Also, it's that time of year when in many countries the clocks change. Our correspondents around the world will unravel the mysteries of daylight savings time. That's in a few minutes. But first of all, European leaders meet in Brussels for a second day. High on the summit's agenda is the digital economy, in particular the so-called Google tax. The French proposal would be for a European-wide tax on digital companies. In recent months, Google, Apple, Amazon have come under attack for using their web of international businesses to avoid paying tax on sales generated in high-tax countries such as France. Currently, Google and Apple channel much of their income through low-tax EU countries like Ireland and Luxembourg, as well as traditional tax havens such as the Bahamas. Now, France is keen to convince fellow EU member states a common approach is needed to ensure European governments do not lose out on much-needed tax revenues. Well, I'm joined by George Bull, Senior Tax Partner at Baker Tilly, to make sense of all of this. Good morning, George.
Good morning.
Thanks for being on the programme. Tell us more, then, about the France proposal.
The France proposal is really very simple, which is to target the top 5 to 7 internet companies and to levy an annual tax on what they do. And the French think this will be terribly fair because these companies are thought to be making away with billions of dollars a year, billions of euros a year in tax, and also with that tax advantage, stifling competition in Europe. There are two angles to this. It's a tricky position. No country, as you said, will be able to tax its way to success. So European-wide agreement really is going to be necessary. And
I was going to say it has to be all countries agreeing and signing on the dotted line, doesn't it? Because Ireland's already sort of taken various steps, but if Ireland did that on its own, it would not really achieve much, would it?
No, I mean, the Irish made their announcement yesterday. People this morning are saying, well, that's fine, it doesn't come in until 2015. So big companies like Google have now got around 14 months to restructure their tax affairs and to use other loopholes. So the game is always changing and no one country can change that game.
Also, interestingly, I mean, the UK politicians here, David Cameron, etc., have been very vocal on this. I mean, it is a very political issue, and yet the UK is a very attractive place, isn't it, for international companies?
It is. Two nations here have very delicate lines to tread. One is the UK, as you say. We've said that we will have the lowest main rate of corporation tax in the G20 by 2015, which is going to mark us out as a bit of a tax haven. The other one, curiously, is the USA. Broadly, they have a policy which says corporate profits are not taxed until they are repatriated to the USA, hence the thing we saw with Apple last year and its Caribbean profit recognition.
So really what we need is a global answer, and will we ever get that? I mean, will we even get this EU answer, do you think?
I don't think we're going to get an EU answer from the French tax proposal. People this morning are smiling and saying, well, the latest tax proposal has got the French footballers on strike. Will the French lose the internet if Google goes on strike? At the very least, an EU-wide agreement is going to be called for.
All right, thank you very much indeed, George, for making sense of all of that. Of course, we'll keep you up to date on that story. And incidentally, we're talking about the football tax story in France when we review the papers. But let's move on, because this weekend, millions of people across Europe, the Middle East and Mexico will get an extra hour in bed as daylight saving time comes to an end. But spare a thought for the millions in Brazil, Chile, Australia, New Zealand, who lost an hour earlier this month when their clocks went forward. Half the world doesn't bother with this strange ritual at all, and opinion remains very divided about the economic benefits or otherwise of the clocks changing. Our international correspondents tell us more.
Here in Japan, they tried daylight saving for a few years back in the late 1940s, but people didn't like it, so they scrapped it. Now there's renewed interest in bringing it back, mainly because of the Fukushima nuclear disaster and the need to save electricity. Estimates are that it would save about 1% of Japan's electricity consumption. So a more compelling reason is to boost the economy. It could generate as many as 100,000 new jobs and add $15 billion to Japan's GDP. But people are still reluctant, mainly because they think the extra long summer evenings won't be used for more leisure, but for more work.
Here, the Greenwich Meridian line at the Royal Observatory was the yardstick from where all the world's time was measured. The idea of daylight saving time was first tried out at the end of World War I to conserve fuel. Certainly one study suggested it increases takings in the EU's leisure industries by 3%. And we have a Londoner, William Willett, to thank for suggesting the idea. He wanted longer afternoons to play golf and ride his horse.
Well, here in Russia, it's summertime all the time. And the man they have to thank for that is Dmitry Medvedev. Back in 2011, when he was president, he declared that turning the clocks back caused stress, upset human biorhythms, and, wait for this one, made all the cows confused. Because when they turned the clocks back, all the milkmaids started arriving for work 1 hour later. Now, I haven't asked Russian cows what they think about staying on summertime, but I do know that a lot of people here have been grumbling about it and complaining that it's far too dark now when they wake up on winter mornings.
Here in Brazil, daylight saving isn't implemented across the whole country. But in the big cities of Sao Paulo, Rio and Brasilia, it is enforced. During the hot summer months here, there's a huge demand for electricity. And official figures suggest that about 400 million reais, or the equivalent of $200 million, can be saved by using daylight saving. But it's not a feature common to the rest of the continent. Daylight saving isn't used in Argentina, Colombia or Venezuela.
All very interesting, isn't it? I must admit, I will relish my extra hour in bed this weekend. I have to grab every moment I can get. Now, let's talk about Samsung. It has posted a record quarterly operating profit thanks to a recovery in its memory chip business and strong mobile phone sales. The South Korean giant's operating profits rose to 10.2 trillion won. In US dollars, that's 9.6 billion. That was during the months of July, August and September. Now, profits at its memory chip business rose to its highest in 3 years. Let's speak to Sharanjit Lail, who's at our Asia Business Hub in Singapore, for more on this. Lovely to see you, Sharon. So Samsung doing very well indeed, which is a massive boost, isn't it, to the South Korean economy? It's such a big player.
It is a big player, and in fact we did see some growth figures from the South Korean economy today as well, rising 1.1% in the last quarter. But let's get back to Samsung, because of course it is its chips business, its Galaxy phones, which led to these stupendous profits, posting a record operating profit, not just now but in 6 of the past 7 quarters, mostly due to the growth of its smartphone division. And what sets it apart, of course, from its big rivals like Apple is that Samsung has enjoyed lots of success in both the top end as well as the lower end of the smartphone market. You remember, of course, Apple only really makes top end iPhones, and Samsung in fact expecting the sales of their smartphones to rise even further in coming months due to year-end promotions over the holiday season as well. And there's a huge improved lineup of mass market phones there too. But there's some concerns over whether Samsung can actually continue to grow at such a strong pace. This onslaught of competition, saturation of some of the key markets as well, and analysts are saying that the company needs to come up with more innovative products to try to sustain this stellar growth rate. Of course, we talked about the chips, the semiconductor business. It saw profit more than double to the highest in 3 years, and that's mainly thanks to stronger chip prices due to a fire at a plant owned by rival Hynix, which caused tighter supply of chips in the market. So Samsung, of course, supplies lots of chips to lots of other smartphone makers, including the likes of competitor Apple, so it's seeing good demand there too.
Thank you very much, Sharon in Singapore. Let's squeeze in some other business stories this morning. And the internet retail platform Amazon has posted a smaller quarterly loss for its third quarter. It's also revealed a 24% increase in sales for the period as it's expanding aggressively. Most of that increase came from its US home market, but the retailer is making big inroads overseas as well. So the markets today, there's a lot of corporate stories for the markets to digest. I can't mention them all in detail in this programme. We just haven't got enough time. But you can see the markets headed in one direction pretty firmly. Japan now down over 2%. Just to mention, in South Korea, we can't show you the Kospi, but the Kospi also off a little bit as well. Some companies like LG Electronics really disappointing today. That's another South Korean company out with its earnings. You can see the currencies, the yen strengthening as well. That's possibly why that Japan, one of the reasons why Japan's having such a tough session. I'll see you soon.